Welcome back. It's time for the Roundtable. This week in business news, Twitter woes and trade pact blows. But while President Obama was busy showing up at baseball games to try and save his trade deal, consumers were busy helping save the economy by spending. Joining us to break it all down, Peter Marisi, making headlines for his opposition to trade authority and making headlines with his reporting on the economy, Josh Boak, AP's economics reporter. Okay, welcome to you both. There's been lots of arguments back and forth over the wisdom of the trade deal or not. It was a big vote for President Obama. Peter, you opposed it all along.
Well, I like TPP as a foreign policy initiative. We need to bind together our allies economically in Asia. It's a great idea that way. But Chuck Schumer was right. We haven't done enough to protect American workers from things like currency manipulation, and the president was opposed to putting that in the package. It's not that I'm against it forever, but I'm against it until we get that fixed.
Josh, they worked on so many different, set aside the currency manipulation, because I think that's a good argument by Peter, but some of the arguments Peter has made in many of his editorials that have made headlines and been carried by several major publications is that when you have more imports than you have exports, it's bad for American workers. But what about the American consumer? We've got consumer spending up. We're buying from markets that we have free trade agreements with, like Mexico, because they're making the products that we want. What's wrong with that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with it per se, but there's a couple things that are going on here. One is this trade deal is being treated as a referendum on globalization at a time when American workers have been struggling with wages. So that's its own issue. But secondly, when we look at consumer spending, it's improving because people are actually getting jobs. What we saw in the May data was that surge of 3 million jobs over the last 12 months is finally trickling into spending in two key categories. One is autos. People are upgrading their cars. And two is housing. People are spending more on building materials because they feel as though they can finally start investing in a home more than 6 years after the recession officially ended.
But listen, both of you, there's a new book out about the mojo of the American economy and where it needs to be. And there are products that aren't made here. Birthday candles are only made in China. They can make them more cheaply. They do. This book argues we've got to stop regretting the manufacturing jobs that are gone and focus on the millions of jobs that are out there that we're not training for. There was money built in for the trade vote for retraining workers. They fixed the problems where they were going to fund that out of Medicare. That was a dumb idea, and they tried to fund it with tax breaks. And yet still there was all this resistance from the Tea Party to progressives saying that anytime you have cheap imports, it's bad for America. And Peter, you accept that argument. You believe it.
No, I don't.
Okay.
My view is that you have to export as much as you import so you can pay for what you buy. It doesn't mean we make candles anymore, and it doesn't mean we only make computer softwares, but there's a lot of products in the middle that would be produced here but for unfair trade barriers by American workers.
Give an example.
Auto parts. More and more of a Ford Motor Company product is being imported. The components, a lot of it has a technology component to it. That is being made in China, Korea, Taiwan, places like that. That is what should be brought back, so that everyone has a job.
We've got to move on, but I'm gonna agree with you there, but only say that we need to focus on the policies to bring those jobs back, not on closing our policies to trade. So, but let's move on, because there were other battles fought this week that people were on the losing end of. Metro losing funding, Josh Boak, at a time when it needs more funding. Talk about that.
Well, this really ties back into what we were just discussing. If you don't have the appropriate infrastructure for people to get to work, for people to maximize their productivity, it's going to be hard to compete against the rest of the world when other countries do invest in their infrastructure. In this case, Metro historically has been funded via Congress at $150 million a year to do repairs, that kind of thing.
Safety is a big problem for Metro right now.
And House Republicans decided to make that $100 million.
Who's wrong here? Who's in the wrong? Who messed up? Are the House Republicans wrong, or did Metro deserve that for not doing their job well enough?
House Republicans are in the wrong.
Peter, do you agree?
No, Metro spends too much on executive salaries and wages for its workers, excessive benefits and so forth. It really should be trimmed back so that its compensation structure is appropriate for the level of workers that it employs, and more of the revenue it generates when you put in that fare card goes to maintenance. For too long now, they've been overpaying themselves while they rely on Congress to make up the difference under the auspices of safety.
So that's great, but that's not going to fix this problem when you're late on your commute.
I think Metro executives need to be paid well so that they run the organization well, and I think they also need to fix some of their own problems. So we can all agree on that. Let's take a quick look, though, at the big CEO departure this week. Dick Costolo, the CEO of Twitter. Wall Street has not been happy with this company because they're not growing fast enough. They're not monetizing fast enough. But guys, Twitter is a global phenomenon. It has changed the world. It is part of the daily conversation. It has allowed for revolutions in Egypt and elsewhere. The Red Cross uses it to let people know where to get emergency shelter in the midst of an emergency. Why is it not working? Peter, you use it.
I use it. I use it primarily to post my articles so people have access if they don't get the newspaper I'm in. But one of the problems, you've just described a lot of people that use Twitter that won't buy any products that are advertised there. You know, revolutionaries in Egypt and in Iraq, they may use Twitter, but they're not going to buy a Brooks Brothers shirt.
Yeah, but Facebook has gotten around that problem. They're finding ways to advertise, and they're using mobile sites. I think Twitter's bigger problem is that there are some people who get Twitter, who love Twitter. I love Twitter. And there are other people, my mom, my sister, my friends, who don't fully embrace Twitter. We've only got a little time left, Josh. What do they need to do to make it more approachable for everyone? You use it all the time.
I love it, but it's a media tool. It's designed for the media. In order for Twitter to compete, it's got to get additional scale, and that means adding Caitlyn Jenners on a semi-daily basis.
Caitlyn Jenner was one of the biggest things ever to blow up on Twitter. I don't think it was designed for the media. I just think they're not bringing in the big enough tent, letting people like my mom understand how to use it and how to embrace it.
It's very difficult for many people to use that aren't trained in words the way we are because of the 165 character limit.
I think that's part of the beauty of it, but I also think it's part of the curse. I think they've got a bright future. They're going to keep changing the world, but I think there are some tweaks that clearly have to be made to the tweets. We'll come back, the pop quiz after the break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. It's time for the pop quiz. And this week I want to double down on what we've been talking about with consumer spending because it was the bright spot in the economy. Josh, look ahead. Is it going to continue to be a bright spot for the economy? Which industries are going to do best in terms of upticks in spending and which ones are still in trouble?
So we've seen steady year-on-year growth with regard to restaurants and internet retailers like Amazon. That's likely going to continue. But the real boost that happened last month was in housing and autos. And for those to stay strong, we're going to need to see interest rates stay relatively low. So watch that.
Peter, what do you think?
Well, my medium-term forecasts agree with Josh. In addition, we're going to see a lot spent on building materials in big cities. Millennials want to live closer to work. It means a lot of rehab work, breaking through on infrastructure. So look for that kind of thing as well.
But I think if we're going to see more spending on big-ticket items and continued spending at restaurants, at retail, wages are going to have to start showing more strength in this economy. But overall, good news. Thank you for joining us this week. We hope to have you back again next Sunday here on Washington Business Report.